Hello and welcome to the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast. This is the show where we talk about all things transportation, anything that gets you from here to there. I'm the traffic anchor and transportation reporter for Denver 7 News, Jason Luber. If you would like to contact me, you sure can. All the contact information is in the contact links area of the podcast, and you can contact me there in the description of the show. You could also call the listener hotline, 303-832-0217, and if you wouldn't mind rating the show, I sure would appreciate it. Let's say you have some errands to run. Maybe you want to go meet some people. With gas prices the way they've been fluctuating, especially on the high side, you're probably more than ever looking for a route that assures you you're not going to be wasting gas. Well, there's a way to conserve that precious fuel in your gas tank while going to where you need to go. Have you heard of the traveling salesman problem? It's a long-studied issue that logistics and especially transportation companies like delivery companies, Amazon, UPS, FedEx, they've studied for years, but it can actually help you out too. To talk more about this is someone way smarter than me. Bill Klimack is a professor with the School of Industrial and Systems Engineering at the University of Oklahoma. He has just about every degree you can earn, including a PhD in operations research from the U.S. Air Force Institute of Technology. Dr. Klimack, thanks so much for being here on the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast.
Well, great to be with you. Thanks.
And also, thank you for your service. Appreciate that very much.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it.
So before we get into what the traveling salesman problem is and how solving that problem can help us, let's get to know you and how you got interested in this type of science and research. So tell us a little bit more about your background.
So I went to Lehigh University as an undergraduate, and I had an ROTC scholarship. And so I was going to, I had a payback period to the Army for doing that. I thought that, I'm an engineer, and I was a chemical engineer, wasn't a good fit for the Army. I'll just do my service time and then get out. But the Army kept offering me really great jobs, so I just forgot to get out for like 26 years. And it was fortunate for me. I got interested in operations research. That's really applying math to real world problems because it really grew out. It was born in World War II, where they discovered that England was kind of desperate, and they asked professors to help them solve some of their problems, and it really helped in terms of national defense. So that's especially within the U.S. Army and the other branches of the services. And I got intrigued by that and stayed for quite some time. So had an interesting career.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And you just kept staying with all of this math stuff, and it didn't ever get too boring for you, and it seemed like it just kept staying exciting for you.
Well, there's plenty of problems out there, unfortunately, right? As we all know, so it's just nice to know there are some methods that can help solve those, especially when they're really tough and they have high uncertainty, but potentially high value, high risk. There are some tools that can be brought to bear to help provide insight.
All right, so let's define what the traveling salesman problem is. Now, according to Wikipedia, every professor's favorite place for information, it says that the traveling salesman problem is this. Given a list of cities and the distances between each pair of cities, what is the shortest possible route that visits each city exactly once and returns to the origin city? So how do you feel about that explanation? Would you add, subtract, or how would you change it?
No, that's really well said. And as you mentioned, this is a really famous problem among applied mathematicians and operations research people, and especially among people that focus on optimization. What is the best solution here that we can seek to a tough problem? So that's right. It's starting at a place of origin, going to multiple places without repeating them in the strict definition, and then returning to your place of origin.
So is this the reason that we've all heard how UPS routes their trucks to only make right turns and no left turns?
Yeah, that's a really interesting story. And actually, a good friend of mine was the person that launched their optimization system that's used on the trucks now, as a matter of fact. And the right turn only rule, it wasn't a hard rule, it was guidance to the drivers. And that was just based on experience and common sense. And that's because if you can avoid left turns cause you to pause for traffic. Now, obviously, somebody in a very rural area, if there's no traffic, it doesn't really matter. But anybody that's in an area that's a suburbs, urban environment where you have to pause and wait, in today's world, right, you're burning fuel, and UPS drivers, of course, are burning time. They're trying to get the packages delivered as well as burning fuel. And so that was a rule that they had. They had guidance to the drivers, and for many, many years, UPS has been around for quite some time. And it wasn't until they launched their Project Orion, where they put an optimizer in the hands of the drivers, that they were able to actually get a solution. But that's where it came from.
You know, I was talking to a guy who was out digging up one of my stumps today because I had this stump that needed to be ground up. Well, he goes out and does this, for, I don't know, he said 10 or 15 stops a day. And he actually has a program, he said, that he would program all the different addresses that he needs to go to, and it would just kind of spit it out and say, all right, you need to go it in this way. But then he said to me, I know traffic patterns better than what this computer system is going to spit out to me, so I'll change it. Is a program that maybe UPS has, do you think they can take all that into effect, have the traffic, maybe historical data and all these other powerful pieces of information fed into a bigger computer data system that can then spit out the most optimal route for these folks and they can save time and money?
Well, I don't know for sure, but I do think they have traffic information available to them. That's pretty common that you could tap into that, right? So if you go into Google Maps, right, the old Waze system is operating, and you can get traffic information. So I think so. I believe that's the case, but I don't know for sure. I've never actually operated the UPS system. I know UPS has said that they have saved over 10 million gallons of fuel in 10 years since launching the system. And they've emitted 100,000 fewer metric tons of carbon dioxide in terms of greenhouse gas emissions because of savings. So obviously it's paid off for them. And can I just say, the history of the problem, this is a really tough problem. And it may seem trivial, if we're talking about just going to a couple places. And if it's just a small number of destinations, that might be easy to think, well, doing it this way is dumb, this way is smart. But when you have a lot of combinations, like let's say you want to visit 50 cities in the continental United States. Well, there's 10 to the 62 possible routes for that. If you just look at going from city A to city B, that's 10 with 62 zeros after it, right? And so the point is, if it really makes a difference to you, and for UPS and FedEx and other companies like that, they rack up a lot of miles over the years, or each year there's a lot of vehicles and a lot of miles. So just a little savings has a big impact on their company. So the problem is so tough that actually there was an article in Newsweek in 1954 that posed a problem, and they talked about if you left DC and went to 48 cities in the continental US. So think of the state capitals in the continental US. And it mentions that RAND mathematicians, RAND is a federally funded research center for the federal government. And in a few weeks by hand, they crunched and got the answer. So it took them a few weeks with very skilled mathematicians. The answer, by the way, was 12,345 miles is what they came up with. And so, but it took them a few weeks to do it. Of course, this is in, the 50s, right? And computational power was quite different then than today, where we have phones better than what the Apollo astronauts, had in computing power. But in 1962, Procter & Gamble ran a contest where they said they listed 33 cities in the continental U.S., and they ran a contest as to who could identify the best route, the best traveling salesman problem solution to that. Their prize was $10,000, and in today's money, that would be $97,000 as a prize. So you can see that it was important. Now, today, we can use apps to largely solve a lot of these things. So again, it's a tough problem when you have a lot of solutions that are available to you and just sorting through those.
My guest is Bill Klimack. He's a professor with the School of Industrial and Systems Engineering at the University of Oklahoma, talking about how the traveling salesman problem can maybe save you money and time and in gas. So let's say there's a delivery company or whatever. They use an app, they use a program to solve this problem. They'll have to keep making new solutions all the time, though, because the variables have to change all the time, whether it's traffic patterns, housing, population, road construction. I mean, the list is probably endless.
Yeah, that's very insightful. That's exactly right. So most delivery services, so you think of FedEx, UPS, Amazon, They normally have routes or regions. I mean, they give their drivers. So a driver knows that he or she might work north of the city or east of the city or whatever that might be. But where they're going that day is highly variable. It's going to change. So what they do is scan the packages on the truck. So normally there's a QR code or barcode on the package. They will scan that, and the system is tracking the packages. So if you track your package for something you've ordered online and you see it's coming, and they'll say, okay, it's now gotten to Memphis or wherever it's gone, you can follow it, and then it'll say out for delivery. That means it went on the truck probably this morning off the loading dock. And what happens is the driver now knows what's on the truck based on the scans, and then he or she runs an optimizer that provides that route for the day. And it can be quite different from day to day. So same region, so they probably know the roads pretty well, and it'll run that. So UPS actually has a good collection of mathematicians and engineers that work on the problem. And so they run their own algorithms. They've written them themselves. And And by the way, I remember just a quick story about the Orion system, because I know several people that worked on it and the guy that ran it. And he was telling me, as we all know, electronics tend to get smaller over time, right? Anything gets miniaturized if it's electronic, and we can think of many things that's the case. And he said, so the first Orion was maybe the size of a clipboard, like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper would fit on it. And that was kind of the prototype. And he said that he was watching drivers actually test the system. And somebody said, hey, the loading dock supervisor was telling the driver, hey, you need to get going. He goes, well, I haven't run my optimizer yet, and he heard that. And he said, okay, this is going to work, when the drivers see the value and are going to use it. And so that worked, and they deployed them. The second generation was a lot smaller, the size of a cell phone. And they were asking drivers for feedback after that. And the main complaint they got was it's too small. And that really surprised them, because normally you want things to be small or it's easy to put in your pocket, that kind of thing. And he asked drivers, hey, why do you want it bigger? And the guy said, well, the first one was big enough I could fend off a dog. so it just shows you that there's unarticulated value sometimes, right? So they made the third one a little bit bigger. It was kind of middle between the initial one and then the cell phone size, and so it just fit another purpose. But it's been very popular, with their drivers, and now, as far as I know, all the companies use that. So there is, and people probably are very familiar with Google Maps. You can put multiple destination into Google Maps, and it'll tell you route. But it's assuming the order you put them in is the order you want to visit them. And so that might be the case, if you're planning an event and you want to go pick something up and then you want to go get the cold stuff from the grocery store last, right? That's a constraint on your different order you could visit the places. Well, you put them in Google Maps in whatever order, that's how it's going to answer it. MapQuest actually will let you move them around. So if you are concerned about, is this really the best route to save me gas, you can do that at MapQuest. And there's a website called Maptive, Maptive, that lists different solutions, and they offer a commercial solution. So if somebody has a business like a florist delivering flowers, or your gentleman taking out your stumps, those kinds of things. Right. If they're doing this commercially, it's probably worth looking at Maptive or some other commercial add-ins that help you. But most of them, they should draw off traffic data. Getting back to your original question, because that can make a difference. So it's not necessarily that you want to minimize the distance. Remember, that's the original statement of that's the canonical traveling salesman problem. What you really probably want to do is minimize time, because that's equating more into fuel consumption. So if you're sitting for a long time waiting to make a left turn, that burns fuel while you're sitting there, even though distance-wise, if you made only right turns, if you could work out a route with that, you might drive a little further, but it's probably going to save you fuel because you're not sitting idling at a traffic light or in a left turn lane waiting for the traffic to clear.
In these solutions, you really could have a solution that gives you a longer distance but a shorter time, and vice versa, and it might work better in some instances to stay out longer and so have a longer time but shorter distance, or vice versa.
That's exactly right. So everybody wants to save time, but if the map is just giving you distance, that may not save you time. And if you're trying to save gas, saving time is probably a better analog than the distance, the mileage that you're driving. That's right.
And as we were talking about how computers have shrunk down, it made me think about circuit boards. And I would even think this problem would relate to circuitry and how you are seeing circuits. You map all the data that goes through a circuit. I mean, I'm sure that this this problem comes into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the traveling salesman problem is a very famous integer programming optimization problem, but it also relates to graph theory. So graph theory is very important. If you think of maps, right? Well, basically, a circuit card, you want to, if you can, get all your circuitry laid out in a two-dimensional layout so that you can create it easily and cheaply, inexpensively for what you're trying to do, right? So it's a very similar type problem and related. So all this gets back to networks, network flow, and what's the minimum spanning tree, or how quickly, or what's the maximum flow through a network. And that's another class of problems that's slightly different, but very related and similar to what we're talking about. So a very insightful point.
My guest is Bill Klimack. He's a professor with the School of Industrial and Systems Engineering at the University of Oklahoma, talking about how the traveling salesman problem could maybe save you some time, money, gas. If somebody gets this right, if you have a program that can help you out, or if you just have enough intuition to try to get it right, how much fuel do you think and how much time could the individual person save?
Well, first, it's highly dependent on what the problem is, right? So if somebody is thinking about a vacation and there's a number of places you want to go on your vacation and you're going to drive and you're driving fairly long distances, clearly that's going to have a different amount of potential savings than if everything's within a few miles of your house and you need to make a couple stops. So that's a factor. And then if it's within a few miles of your home, that may be a short distance, but it may be a repetitive type of problem. So if for instance, how you do your grocery shopping, that type of thing will have an effect. So it's really hard to say, but I think that if you are, it wouldn't be unusual to see maybe a 5% savings of gasoline on a very long, on a driving trip. If you're, say, going on a week's vacation, going to a number of spots. If you only go to one place and park and then like hike the Grand Canyon, then of course wouldn't have that much effect, right? If you're just going to one place.
Or you're just going to stop for just a few minutes at the world's largest ball of yarn, and then you want to keep on going to the Grand Canyon.
I've missed that one. That one I haven't seen yet. So if you have some tips on visiting, let me know.
Okay. But it seems like savings wouldn't really come on the individual level, that it's really from a collected or group changes in behavior and fuel consumption, right? In other words, you have, instead of one or two people in your household, you're going to save a lot more if you have a company with 100 or 200 trucks.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true, right? The scale. Just the more you're spending on fuel, the more potential savings you have just because of scaling up, even if you're saving the same percentage amount. But one thing in a household, because gas is so expensive, right? Everything we can do is helpful. And so we do things normally in a household repetitively, like buying groceries and so on. And so my advice there is first of all, there's things called heuristics, and heuristics are rules of thumb, if you will, to do approaches. One heuristic is called the next nearest neighbor. So if you go to the first place you're going to go on running trips around town to run errands, the next nearest neighbor would be the next closest place and go to that. And so that actually almost never produces the optimal answer, by the way, but it's easy to figure it out. But just a good thing to do is think about trying to group what you do. So if you have choices during the week or maybe during the month for things that you need to do, like, for instance, I have to be concerned about my yard, so I have to go buy fertilizer periodically and, go buy those kinds of things. And so if you can, and I'm giving here obvious solutions, but try to group those trips. If I'm going to the same area, the same part of town where I buy my fertilizer, well, what else do I need to pick up one in the area here can be helpful. And then people tend to think spatially, right? If I'm going to go to the east part of town to get something, what else is there? And that's great. But it's also a temporal question, time-wise. So like over the week or over the month, can I consolidate trips just to be more efficient in what I'm doing? Again, pretty obvious solution, but, we tend to behaviorally, just kind of go do whatever we do. Just trying to think about it and plan it out can pay some dividends too.
But Bill, I'm more of a pragmatic kind of person, and in real life, pragmatic people sometimes say, well, yeah, that route will maybe be close to optimal, but I'm not going to beat myself over the head with trying to have the perfect optimal route to try to save the most amount of time and money.
Yeah, well, I mean, common sense should prevail, right? And of course, it may be that, if you have an anniversary with your significant other, right, that doesn't mean you should wait and go out when I can also go buy the fertilizer.
Right.
That
sounds practical
probably,
to me, though.
Yeah, probably not real romantic to go buy fertilizer with your significant other, no
No.
matter what his or her interest might be, probably, Well, there was an interesting story, again, from the UPS group, is that this one manager at UPS was telling my friend Jack Levis that, hey, I want everybody to do exactly what Orion says. And Jack, who was running the program, said, I don't think we want that. I think we want the drivers to be informed by Orion, but make their own decisions, because Orion's a model, that's their traveling salesman problem solution system. And it's a model, but there are things in the world beyond the model, right? And those things can certainly come into play. And he happened to be on a business trip with this manager, and they were driving down the road, and it was a 2-lane road to somewhere, and there was a traffic accident, unfortunately, in front of them, and the traffic was stopped. And so this guy said, I think I'll turn around and we'll go a different way. And he said, well, what if Orion told you to go down this road this way? Do you want the driver to sit here and wait? And he goes, okay, good point. So you need to temper everything with common sense and make sure that it seems right. If somebody's making a big trip, though, good to pull out, one of these apps and just plug it in and see what it tells you.
It's funny because the apps will tell you one thing, but you never know. And here's a perfect example. There was maybe about a month ago, there was a closure of an interstate over here in Denver. And you could see, I was telling everybody in the world about it on television. I was tweeting it out. All the other TV station people and the people on radio were telling people about it. It was all on your phone. I mean, it was pretty much everywhere, and all the apps had this big traffic jam pretty much saying, don't drive on this road, it's closed. But there are still then people I'm watching at an on-ramp trying to get on that interstate. So it's almost like no matter what you do to help out the people, even with these type of programs, they're just going to almost lemmingly follow along and get caught.
That's certainly true. I guess all I can say to that is don't be that guy. You just want to be prudent in how you live your life. And there's going to be some of that no matter what. That's right.
So is there a way to maybe make some of these apps more free and open to the public? Like you said, Google Maps, as we've all used that. It's all, you just have to put it in which destination you're going to go to next. Can't you have one that will, like you say, shuffle everything around, find the best optimal route that I don't have to pay for?
Yeah, MapQuest will do that. So MapQuest is pretty easily available. If somebody just types that in the search engine, they should get that. And again, if they go to Maptiv, MAPTIVE, and I have no connection with them, I was just looking around for things I could provide on advice. And they do have a list of different solutions as well, both for a commercial company and then just a private consumer that's looking for free information. But I would say at first take a look at MapQuest and see what that says in ordering the route. And if you're not satisfied, I honestly don't know how good the traffic information is on MapQuest, but you can always then take that route and put it into Google Maps or whatever you're using today that provides you traffic information, and then alter the route appropriately. See if it gives you different advice once the traffic information is placed in there.
Do you think this equation or a solution to the traveling salesman problem can be used on someone who is just going to walk in an urban downtown area or ride one of those e-bikes or scooters? Can it help out even in those situations?
Sure, it's actually transportation mode independent. Of course, if you're walking, your payoff is going to be different, in terms of you're saving gas regardless, right? As opposed to driving, of course. But it doesn't matter what your mode of transportation is. And again, the original transportation traveling salesman problem, was just based on mileage. How you traveled that mileage, whether you drove it or you took some other form of transportation, wasn't even really part of the problem.
Because when you're walking, you're just using your own energy, and sometimes you maybe want to use more of your own energy to lose a little weight, right?
Well, having from my time in the Army, as an infantryman, I'll just say that it's a lot easier to walk along a contour line than to go perpendicular to the
Right.
contour lines on the map.
Right.
So sometimes again, it's not the distance. In fact, I used to do mountaineering quite a bit as a hobby, and route finding is really important in the mountains to avoid hazards like avalanche or rockfall and those kinds of things. So it can get more complex, but in terms of running an optimizer and the traveling salesman problem, it can be equally applicable. But if it's taking me on a route where I'm worried about avalanche hazard, I think I'm going to revise the route, or I'll dig a snow pit first and test it.
I think I'll just hang out at the lodge.
Yep.
Enjoy a couple of cocktails.
Mm-hmm.
My guest is Bill Klimack. He's a professor with the School of Industrial and Systems Engineering at University of Oklahoma. So what is the best way, then, do you think, we can get around and save money? Is it trying to solve this traveling salesman problem? Is it another way? Is there any great way to, really a best way to save time, money, gas?
Well, I think the main point is just to be aware, to consider, have I thought about what is the best way to do it? I'm doing best here in air quotes, because it's really to optimize, right? And we optimize a lot of things in life, including like we're not buying fertilizer when we're going out on an anniversary dinner, kind of thing, right? And so it needs to make common sense for you, but just apply those things to save money at the gas pump. And you're also reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other things as well. So I think that to have that mindset is just valuable. And so gas has become far more expensive than it was. And so it becomes more important because it has a bigger impact on our finances. So it just causes us, I think, to, as rightly so, just to think a little bit harder about, hey, am I really doing the right thing here? Or am I making my trips, or am I running my errands in the best possible way that I can?
And this too will pass. Everything eventually will pass. Gas prices eventually, you would, well, from my lips to God's ears, would come down. But this is also a issue for electric cars, because you have a certain range you can go in these electric cars, and it's not that easy, at least for right now, to stop at a gas station, fill up after 5 minutes, and then keep on going.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I saw there was just a news article where a reporter drove cross country, and she commented she spent more time recharging the vehicle than she did sleeping, because it just takes time to recharge. So if you're using an electric vehicle for only short errands around your home, probably it's not a factor. But if you're driving long distances, you do have to make sure you allocate enough time and are at a place where you can recharge your vehicle. A former colleague was telling me he had bought an electric car a number of years ago and was driving between Houston and Dallas, Fort Worth, and he had looked up that, yep, they could make it, no problem. And it was going to say use 90% of the battery. And he decided to make sure it was completely topped off before he left. And he said, I was glad I did it because I forgot I was making the trip in the winter. They needed the electric battery to provide heat in the car, because an internal combustion engine gives off heat as a byproduct, and so it's easy to warm the car in the winter. So just there's some differences between vehicles, but the traveling salesman problem is still helpful in terms of saving your resources. How important those resources are and what they cost, of course, can be different.
And not just heating the car, also your batteries will lose energy when you are in those colder temperatures or hotter temperatures. I've had a Chevy Volt for 8 years. I had one before that. This is my second one I've actually owned. Now, the great thing about it, the one I have, it's an electric car, but it has a generator in the front of it, so I can keep filling it up with gas and keep going and generate electricity and keep driving forever if I need to. So that's the benefit. But I've learned that you will lose range with high temperatures, low temperatures, however you're driving on the interstates compared to just tooling around on some of the side roads at 35 miles an hour. There are huge differences in your range depending on all of those driving styles, and I think people are going to need to get used to all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep, great points. That's right. All the technologies have advantages and disadvantages, and they all have their idiosyncrasies. That's exactly right.
Well, I think I think we're all better off now knowing what you know, or at least some of what you know, with this traveling salesman problem.
Well, glad to share. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners about it. And I certainly wish everybody all the best in their travels, and hope what I had to offer was helpful.
Oh, most definitely. Thanks again, Bill, for all your time and your expertise. Can't thank you enough for spending the time with us.
Oh, glad to do it. Thank you.
See, smart guy, smart man. I'm not a traveling salesman, but I tell many where to go every single day on TV. Yay! Every time I go to the airport, though, I think I could have a traveling job, and then the longer I spend in the airport, I think I don't want to have a traveling job. I consider myself very adept at travel planning and travel navigating, looking at a map once. When I drive around a town, I can look at a map once, drive around a town for a few days, and then I'll really start to figure it out. And I think southern cities are more difficult, and northeastern cities are more difficult than western cities, because the roads in the east, they were basically just trails in the 17 and 1800s. Just windy, makes no sense trails that are now roads. The west, it's all straight lines, spread out a mile apart, easier to figure out, easy to understand. It's like it's way easier to understand than, hey, it's 1803. Let's just go this way through the woods. And eventually, 200 years later, that becomes a road. There's really no rhyme or reason. When I was in Atlanta, everything is Peachtree something. There's Peachtree Dunwoody, Peachtree Street, Peachtree Ashford. I mean, there's just all these different variations of Peachtree something. Because they're, peach crazy. They're in Georgia, and that's fine. But you find all these windy roads, and that's just the way it is in the East compared to the West. Anyway, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Luber, the traffic guy. Be safe, and as always, happy motoring.